Hi, everyone. Welcome to Doc to Doc episode 20. We're so excited to be here to talk with you today about sugar. And this is a massive episode. We're going to go over this will be part one. Part two will be in a couple weeks. We'll present ways to try and be metabolically healthy and try to reduce sugar in the diet. And sugar is it's plentiful in the American diet, as you'll see in a few minutes. First, a few housekeeping housekeeping items. We're on both YouTube and podcasting on Spotify and Apple. So feel free to subscribe to any of those platforms that you like to use. On YouTube, you can hit the subscribe button and the little bell sign, and that will let you know when new episodes are released. So today, this is a big episode for us. It's episode 20. And so this is really a culmination of many hours of work on different aspects of lifestyle medicine. And we're going back to diet a little bit, and specifically a focus on sugar. And some of these facts, I was shocked when I read these facts and figures about sugar. And Abbas, do you have any initial thoughts?
Yeah, that's I think is a key part of today of what's that health issues in America. Sugar play a big nucleus of that, and the problem I think neither politically neither is a popular demand to recognize this and refuse it, because everybody wants to have the cake and the sugar and the soda and all of that. So what I think is if we do not get ourselves educated and confront this is going to be even a bigger problem in future in individual as well as in health industry as well as longevity.
Yeah, and definitely I encourage everyone, we've talked about this before, but take a look at labels, because you will be shocked about the amount of sugar in foods that are billed as healthy. For example, oat milk. Oh my goodness. You can see there can be over 10 grams of sugar or more in a cup of oat milk that's sold with added sugar. Yogurt. The vanilla yogurt, I was just eating one the other day and looked at I was in a hotel, so I wasn't really able to select the yogurt, but I was looked at the label, had 10 grams per serving of added sugar to the yogurt. And so this stuff is it's kind of insidious, and you really have to keep an eye out, because you can easily get another 20-30 grams of sugar a day and not even know it. And the recommended amount of sugar, we'll go through it here in a few minutes, is about for a man is about 30-ish grams. For females, about 25. So you can eat even just you can try to avoid sugar, and you're still getting more than the recommended daily amount. And so there's a lot here, and we have a bunch of slides to go over. Of course, any questions or comments, please feel free to hit us up in the website, doctor.health, or that you can leave comments on YouTube, and also our emails are on the linked on the description as well. You can email us at our emails, and we'll respond to those. So shall we kick this off, Abbas?
Sure.
Okay, let me.
Understanding the sugar, we need to know a little bit about history and evolution of this. Sugar, the word come from a Persian word shakar. This has been cultivated in India for probably 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, and was mostly used for animal feedstock and locally. About 2,500 to 3,000 years ago in India, they find the method of crystallization of the sugar, and once they were able to crystallize the sugar, then we were able to export it to Persia and Middle East, as well as to China. This was mostly used as a medicinal purpose, And after Middle East and Asia, when the Muslim conqueror came to the Middle East, they used that actually as a promotion for expanding Islam, both in Islam and Christianity, and then become more popular, and subsequently through Moorish to Mediterranean to Cyprus, Sicily, and Iberia Peninsula, they brought the sugar to Europe. After the Muslim, the Crusaders, they used that more widespread through the Europe. However, it was not popular until the discovery of the New World. When Columbus came to Caribbean, and when Portuguese discovered South America, particularly in Brazil, they brought the sugar cane from Canary Islands to there, and there was a great environmental thing to grow sugar. And unfortunately, this was one of the biggest cause of slavery, or 12 million African they brought to cultivate this, both in Caribbean and South America. And shortly after that, the sugar beets become popular in Europe, and the sugar industry was like fossil fuel, become a big industry in Cyprus, Sicily, and as well as in Venice. There were the big sugar refinery and exporting to all over the world. So sugar has evolved, but however, for past couple hundreds, the consumption has become from medicine to elites to a common household. And if you look at the consumption of the sugar in 1700s in North America, each person was using about 2 pounds of sugar per year. In late 1800s, that increased to 9 pounds per sugar per person. However, unfortunately, today with so much use it in more additive preservative as daily food, each American consume more than 150 pounds of sugar per year, and that's increasingly continuously. So as Rob mentioned before, sugar is in most of the food we use directly or indirectly. So we need to look at how much we do, and that's becoming has become a part of the daily living, and taste and enjoyment has becoming a huge effect on health and longevity.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about background about how sugar is processed by the body. Then we'll go into how we've how the link potentially between sugar and obesity, and we got lots of information here. So starting off, we're just going to start off at this is the basics of how insulin works. And so insulin is one of the most important hormones in the body, and what it is a peptide. So a peptide is a short string of amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of protein. And that's the little triangle here that you can see. And that when we eat, insulin is secreted by the pancreas. Actually, the pancreas has it ready to go. And so every 3 to 6 minutes, these waves of insulin get released by the pancreas in reaction to what we eat. And so the idea is, my suspicion is why this works this way is that you don't want the body storing glucose when you're not eating. So the idea is when you eat and putting glucose and other nutrients in, that's a signal that, okay, now we need to let the nutrients go inside the cells of the body. So this works in the liver, in the muscle, many different tissues in the body. So insulin is made and secreted by the pancreas, hits the insulin receptor on the cell membrane, And then the first thing it does is it activates this glucose transporter 4, or GLUT4. And what that does is it allows the pool of glucose outside the cell to rapidly go in to the cell. And then once it's there, it can do multiple different things. It can be metabolized to glycogen, which is a storage form of glucose. It's mostly in the liver. It can get metabolized to pyruvate. That's if it goes directly into energy, it's going to go into pyruvate. That's the energy pathway. So basically, that would, if you're, for example, if you're exercising, and usually it's like heavy exercise, and glucose goes into the muscle and it goes right into the metabolism immediately. Or it can go into storage, and that's the triglycerides or fatty acids. And that's how this will work. It's kind of amazing that the body can process the glucose, and it basically has a kind of a choice of, based on the tissue and the metabolic load on the body, how that processing works. It's kind of a fascinating system. Of course, it's way more complicated than this. This is just a good conceptual model. So for glucose, we're going to talk. This episode's about sugar. The main sugar that you find in the diet is what's called sucrose, which is basically is a combination of fructose and glucose. Basically, fructose being one of the main sugars that's in fruit. That's why it's called fructose. And but it's present in low concentration, so it's not high concentration like we see today in high fructose corn syrup and whatnot. It's actually present in very small concentrations in fruit. Just going to move to the next slide here. So this article is one of many, many, many articles you can find on sugar in the database of this is called PubMed. So this is one that was available online. Thought it was an interesting article trying to link sugar and with obesity. It's actually harder than it seems. We can say yes, anecdotally, these are probably related, but how do you actually come to try to prove this, or try to look at this relationship and say this is causal, that higher sugar is related to the obesity problem we have in the US and worldwide? So here's some obesity, overweight and obesity facts. So pretty striking here. And basically the take home with this is that being overweight is really becoming normal now. And so obesity in the United States was in 2014, 35% for men and 40% for women. The prevalence of obesity is about double about 60 to 70% prevalence of being, of being overweight is about 60% thereabouts. Children and adolescents have seen a steady rise from the 70s of 5% to 17% in 2013, 2014. So that's about a tripling in 40-ish years. So pretty striking. So something is going on here. I mean, this is dramatic changes. We don't really have much data before 1970, but we do have some pretty good baseline data that's useful. We'll talk about the body mass index, and also waist circumference is also important because body mass index does not accurately describe everybody. For example, in athletes who may have more lean muscle, body mass index may not work well. And if you just looking at kind of high level view, between 1960 and 2014, obesity level in the U.S. increased by more than 100%. So some pretty dramatic changes in 50 years in the U.S. So this is a pretty striking change. This is the body mass index graph from Wikipedia, and you can feel free to use either your metrics on the left side here on the bottom, or the conventional imperial units on the right. But basically, as you increase in as the weight increases for a given height, you can see there's different categories. Normal being about 18.5 to 25, and then you get into overweight, obese, and morbid obesity. And so this accurately describes most people. There are some people who fall out of this. So it's important to, this isn't for everybody. This is for adults. For children, there's a different graph for them. So this is in kids. Metabolic syndrome in obese adolescents is as high as 30%. We talked about metabolic syndrome, those 3 of those 5 criteria that we talked about, including the different, and obesity is one of those criteria for metabolic syndrome, but insulin resistance and triglycerides, there's several different criteria that we look at for, but metabolic syndrome is associated with a variety of health issues, including cardiovascular disease. And this is something that obese adolescents and kids are going to be a huge burden on the health system coming up here over the next 10 years. There were 100,000 excess cardiovascular events in our country, just related to childhood obesity. It's kind of striking here, not to mention all the other health issues. And this is I thought it was kind of interesting that obese children have a vascular age similar to that of a 45-year-old adult. The cardiac structure is different, higher epicardial fat deposition, diastolic and systolic dysfunction, and their atria, the top chambers of the heart, are actually stiffer. So really, really fascinating that it's actually aging their cardiovascular system. So a little bit about sugar consumption in the U.S. and doing surveys has not been helpful. Folks generally underestimate the amount of sugar that they're eating. My theory on this is that they don't realize they're eating so much sugar because it's hidden, and it's just kind of become, just kind of in certain foods that are, it's kind of an expected part of the diet. But if you look at the formal surveys where you look at how much sweeteners are being produced and how much is being used and wasted, you can actually see the amounts of different sugars. It's not just one type of sugar, it's cane and beet sugar, high fructose corn syrup, other sweeteners, molasses, and honey. And we really have good stats on this since 1970. Before 70, there wasn't really good statistics on this. I thought that was kind of interesting about fructose, and I just put this little factoid in here. So when you eat fructose, so this is high fructose corn syrup or table sugar, also is very similar to fructose, you get decreased secretion of insulin and leptin. And both of those hormones will make us feel full. So if you eat a lot of fructose, you don't get full. And that's, that, for example, eating candy, which is very high in fructose, you never get full because of this. There's actually less insulin and leptin that are secreted as a result of the fructose intake. So that was kind of interesting. So normally with most foods, if you eat, you should feel full and stop eating, but not the case with fructose. This is kind of striking. American Heart Association for adult woman recommends 25 grams a day. Adult man for 37.5 grams a day. I mean, look at where we are at the top of this chart here. This is the total amount of sugar. We're about 87, 88 grams back in 1970, and we increased. This is total sugar up into about year 2000 was kind of the peak sugar, about 110 grams per day, and then it's come down. This is also kind of interesting that the amount of refined cane and beet sugar has gone down over the last from 1970 1985, but commensurate with that, high fructose corn syrup entered the market and came up quite a bit. But the the total amount of sugar has steadily increased. And that's the take-home point from the 70s to about the year 2000. The total amount of sugar has gone up. And right now we're roughly about 300% of the recommended amount per day is where things are at. So it's kind of it's a pretty striking statistic. This is one of the main parts of the paper. I thought it was interesting. By no means can this be construed as causal in any way, but the idea here is that if you look at different time points, and on the top here is obesity, the obesity prevalence in the U.S., and then if you overlay that with sugar consumption on this lower graph here, you can see as basically the idea is that as sugar consumption went up from the 70s, 80s up to 2000, obesity also went up. Now that could have been as many factors at play there, so it can't prove it's sugar causing this, but when sugar consumption did go down a little bit from about 2000 to the 2010s, the rate of obesity did trend a little bit. The rate increased at a slower pace. So again, this is not, we can't really draw any firm conclusions here, but we can say that there may be a link, and that was kind of interesting. So this a couple more slides here, then I'll let Abbas take over. So this is from the USDA, so official stats. This is it. Average American eats or drinks 34 teaspoons of sugar a day, 500 calories, more than 100 pounds of sugar per year. About 150 is the best estimate that I've seen. And and Abbas mentioned this too. 1822, the average American ate in 5 days the amount of sugar found in one of today's 12-ounce sodas. Now we eat that much every 7 hours. I mean, just dramatic. Also, in terms of glycemic index and the starches are also very important. That not to forget, starch. Basically, below the neck. This is something that I recently learned, is that the body really doesn't distinguish between flour and sugar below the neck. It tastes a lot different, but from an insulin resistance perspective, flour is very similar to sugar in that it's a different. The insulin peak is different. It's a different secretion pattern with the starches, but there is definitely a role of starch here in terms of insulin resistance, and we eat a ton of flour as well. So in addition to the sugar, we're eating about 126 pounds of flour per year, and so it's quite striking. So in conclusion, well, sugar is necessary for a healthy life, and the consumption trend is going in the right direction. Consumption trends are actually going down, which is great. We're still at more than 300% of the recommended amounts, and trends in increased sugar consumption, including the concerning trend of the high fructose corn syrup, are highly concerning for a link to obesity.
As Robert eloquently explained the metabolism of the sugar, with consumption of sugar, also the substitute sugar, as well as the flours, as you see in the market, that has created many effects on today's health, not only in the United States, and has become a worldwide problem. One of the common things as we deal with daily in our practice is obesity, diabetes, and insulin resistant, as well as cardiovascular disease. Consequently, there has been related with increase of cancer and possibly dementia. The dental work has been associated with the sugar consumption, as well as some of the nutritional deficiency. One of the interesting topic is the sugar is like other stimulants is an addiction, and once you consume large amount of sugar or sodas, then it becomes apparent that you continue to have that to stimulate your needs and craving. So so in conclusion, as Rob and I mentioned, sugar is necessary for our daily life. However, our use of this is a huge health issue, and in my opinion, due to lack of both political as well as the industry for economy, as well as lack of the people to avoid sugar. This has becomes an issue that nobody wants to tackle, like global warmings or other issues that we have. So for example, tobacco was had similar history, but we know that the effect on the body and has reduced severe amount of consumption of that. But this is cause hidden disease, and we're not directly associated with that, and consequently, this is a major health crisis in here and abroad. And I think today we'll introduce you to the sugar, and on the next episodes we'll talk more about how you can be more aware of it. Or number one, decrease the sugar, as well as look for the effect on your body, and how you can decrease the effect by exercise and other methods like fasting. What do you think, Rob? Anything else we can add to it for today?
No, I think that was great, Abbas. And one of the things I learned going through this is that obesity itself does not mean that someone is metabolically unhealthy. Obesity is a risk factor for metabolic syndrome, but it's not in and of itself indicative of metabolic dysfunction. It's part of the process, and definitely encourage folks to maintain a healthy body weight, of course. But I'm increasingly convinced that we have to test and test repeatedly to see, and we'll talk about this in the next episode about all the different factors that go into this. So lipids, the hemoglobin A1C, and we'll talk about all these different things. And I've personally found the continuous glucose monitor to be extremely helpful in this regard, because you can actually see the effect of individual foods, meals on the blood glucose. You can look at the peak and how high it goes up, the length of time it's elevated, how many peaks you're having per day, different foods. I mean, of course, you can't keep a continuous glucose. Well, you can keep a continuous glucose monitor on all the time, but it's hard to do all the time. But it's very educational. I encourage folks to look into this, and we'll talk about this at the next episode.
Exactly. I think just awareness of what has sugar in what you put in your mouth. Secondly, be aware of your health issue and other things. See what you can do, at least even small increment, exercise, healthier diet, other things, plays at sugar metabolism, stress, and other things. So this is just one piece of the puzzle for longevity and better health. So we'll discuss more in detail, how you can improve that.
And my research on this topic indicates that increasingly the metabolic health is the number one thing that we need to, that is the most important part for longevity. So there's other things too, of course. It's not the only thing, but this is an extremely important part of the longevity puzzle. And so look forward to the next episode. And if anyone has comments, questions, please let us know, and we'll get back to you. And thanks for watching.
Thank you. See you next episode. Stay healthy.